Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished entrepreneur from the world of real estate from Mumbai, India, Minal Srinivasan. Minal, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for making me a part of the show.
Thank you.
Honor to be on your show.
Thank you so much. Minal is the managing director of Kesari Infrabuild Private Limited, which is KIPL, which is one of India's top 10 environmental consultancy firms. So, Minal, let me start by asking you a few questions for you, then we'll get to Kesari Infrabuild. You spent 17 years in the corporate world before transitioning into entrepreneurship. What sparked that bold decision to join your family business?
Very interesting question. And, I honestly, it's one of my favorite questions and I love answering that. So I think, Ashutosh, building businesses was something which was always very dear to me. And I believe that I'm a creator at heart. So whether it's creating a piece of art piece or whether it's building businesses across in different domains has been something that's always appealed to me. I think entrepreneurship gives anybody that platform to be able to do that, not only shaping your life, but also shaping, people around you. So I think that was one reason which kind of, propelled my decision. Apart from the family compulsions, of course, I mean, being a mother and, then kind of taking up a full-time assignment didn't really go well. But I would want to mention a couple of books which have had a deep influence on me when it comes to taking this bold decision on entrepreneurship. And one of the first books that I profoundly impacted my life is this Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Okay.
Sure, that's a book which has been widely read by everybody. I think that defined a sense of purpose in terms of, what is it that you can contribute and what are the professions that you should be looking at. So I think that's one book which deeply influenced me. The second one was by Joe Dispenza, Evolve Your Brain. I think it's an interesting book. I don't know if you've read it, and I recommend that book to everybody. It is about, the principles of neuroscience and how you can constantly endeavor to improvise your brain and make your life better and everybody else's life better. I think that was something which kind of took away that fear from me of changing the domain. And I think it propelled my intellectual versatility, I would say, to have worked in a certain area in an international domains in the field of academia and then shifting to domestic market and working with governments, looking with absolute, base level and looking at environment as an area where you want to contribute to. I think so that book really shaped. The third book which shaped my perspective on how you would want to do this business is Conscious Capitalism. By John Mackey, and who's the founder of Whole Foods and Raj Sisodia. So I think that provided me the how of how this business can get conducted. So it's not, it extrapolates the maxims of free enterprise capitalism to being able to serve the chain of stakeholders in a much better way. So benefits of free enterprise capitalism, how can you really use it for societal benefits and to serving your stakeholders better? So I think these three books gave me the what, the why, and the how.
Amazing.
And
that's very well described. Thank you. But tell me, entering a male-dominated field like environmental infrastructure must have posed some unique challenges. How did you navigate this transition?
Honestly, I would like to take you back a little bit into my upbringing at that point in time. Ashutosh, I have been very fortunate to have been brought up in a family which really never made a distinction of a man and a woman or a boy or a girl, So my parents really brought me up as a typical lower middle class girl, instilled the values of a middle class upbringing. But never made the distinction that you are a woman, and
Yeah.
hence, in fact, on the contrary, honestly, I was treated more like a man by my father.
Yeah.
And my fierce independence really stems from that. Having said that, when I stepped into this particular domain, yeah, the environment around you keeps on giving you this nudges, that yes, you are a woman in a male-dominated domain. In fact, even my earlier profile, when I was working 17 years of my corporate life, I have worked alongside men in different geographies, building businesses in different geographies. There, honestly, that distinction was never there. But out here, yes, as I told you, people do keep on nudging you. But I think, Ashutosh, when you really support your voice with not only data, but by very strong execution and very strong demonstrable outcomes,
Yeah.
I think the distinction just blurs. It totally blurs. So whether I'm talking to any of my clients as a problem solver when it comes to, looking at consulting, or as somebody who's implementing the sustainable infrastructure, I approach them as a problem solver, not as a woman entrepreneur.
Right.
And I think people really, really appreciate that. And also I think once you start giving importance to substance over symbolism, I think the distinction really, really blurs.
Well said.
I guess it does pose challenge, but what is life without challenges, right?
Absolutely.
I think it's just like the dash of spice that you add to make your food more palatable. So to
Correct.
make your work enjoyable, I think I look at it like that.
Fantastic. Let's now talk about Kesari Infrabuild, where you focus on environmental compliance, water and wastewater treatment, and sustainable infrastructure solutions. Tell me, how does Kesari Infrabuild ensure that infrastructure projects comply with India's evolving environmental regulations?
Okay. So we do quite a bit of interesting work at Kesari Infrabuild, and I think the work that we do gives us immense pride in terms of being able to balance capitalism with environmental conscious services. Talking about the consulting part of and which includes obviously the approvals, the environment approvals, and environmental audits, environmental compliances. Let me just kind of give you a little bit of background because for the viewers, if you really don't understand what environmental clearances and compliances are all about, it will not really make sense for them. So just to explain you in simple words, whenever you develop any kind of infrastructure for that matter, okay, you somewhere down the line building any new infrastructure does imbalance various facets of environment, various facets of nature. So it could be soil, it could be air, it could be water, it could be the waste part of it. It could be the biodiversity equilibrium in the environment. So if you as an organization if you as a project proponent is kind of contributing to changing the balance, the laws of the environment, which are mandated by Ministry of Environment and Education, kind of make sure that you restore the balance.
Right.
And how do you restore the balance? So there is a regulatory framework, okay, which you need to adopt. And that regulatory framework is something which you need to comply even before you start with your projects. And we as environmental consultants are necessarily the bridge between the regulators and the project proponents. So to ensure that, and most often there is this myth, which I really want to debunk, or rather at least try to mitigate, which says that the infrastructure development has to necessarily come at the cost of environment.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think when you talk about this regulatory framework in fact facilitates you to continue with your infrastructure development while making it environmentally compliant.
Well said. But tell me, what are some of the most common environmental compliance challenges or issues a lot of infrastructure projects face today?
Yeah. So, environmental challenges, issues are a galore, and it is a function of the industry that you're part of.
Yeah.
So if you look at the overall challenges, if I just look at the infrastructure, say building and construction, to be, just to give you an example, to be talking about that, you have issues related to the biodiversity mismanagement. You have issues related to water and wastewater treatment plants. You have issues related to the air pollution. And these issues get compounded as you move on to more and more complex industries. For example, if you look at industries which are highly polluting, which is the chemicals, dyes, textiles, pharmaceutical, so they have more stringent norms. The issues are honestly a galore. Given the framework that the ministry has laid down, the MOAFCC, which has laid down, and there are various acts. I cannot, talk about it without just briefly mentioning some of the acts which govern it. And I think the government of India is doing a fantastic job in terms of ensuring that these acts are in place. So, for example, when you talk about air pollution, there is an Air Pollution Prevention Act, which essentially means that the effluent that comes out of, the air, the NOx, SOx values have to be under control, and you need to be able to demonstrate that what is the amount of pollution you are now. The CPCB norms, that's the pollution. Central Pollution Control Board, the State Pollution Control Board, which are the monitoring authorities. Okay, they are the ones who control that. So you need to ensure that the pollutants which you're throwing off in the air are mitigated. There are certain technologies which you need to be that. Similarly, water and wastewater treatment, the amount of effluent discharge. So, for example, industries, now there is a clear-cut norm for a zero liquid discharge, which means the wastewater that you throw out, it has to be zero liquid. So the entire wastewater needs to be reused for other purposes.
Right.
And that is more stringent for industries. But in case of building and construction, maybe 65% of the wastewater that you use has to be reused. So, even the biodiversity, the trees, for example, there's a tree act. Okay, so for every tree that you cut, depending on the age and the health of the tree, there's a factor of, say, 3 to 5 trees which you need to plant. Now, the challenges which typically, for example, the building and construction may have is a paucity of space. For example, when you do construction in cities like Mumbai, or for that matter, even Delhi, the paucity of land and the biggest challenge. So then, as per the environmental norms, you have to dedicate, say, 10% of your area on Mother Earth for recreational activities, RG areas. Now, where do the developers and the project proponent get these areas? So even when it comes to water and wastewater treatment, the cost becomes a major challenge. And unfortunately, a lot of people are still looking at it as an expense. So that shift in the mindset needs to be there. So different industries, and plus the compliance issues. The regulatory bodies really come down very, very heavily on the industries. So to the extent that not only fines, but even the industries could get shut down because of non-compliance issues.
Very interesting. What a great response. Thank you. You've explained this so simply and so clearly to all of us. Thank you. My next question, Minal, is what role does technology play in helping your clients maintain all the different compliances?
So technology is like a non-negotiable today, and it's more of an imperative. Okay, so if I were to take again, see, when I talk about environment, I have to delve into each and every facet. So if I look at even the air pollution or water and wastewater treatment, the effluent discharge, the monitoring has a lot of technological inputs in it in terms of things like IoT sensors, which are used to record the output of these kind of effluents. So whether it's water, wastewater discharge, or whether it's air pollution. So these sensors are used as part of the overall infrastructure that is used for monitoring. Apart from that, even in consulting, there's a lot of AI-based reports that we kind of are generating today, thanks to the advent of AI. I think it has made a life a lot more easier. So technology is very, very, in fact, technologies like MBBR, MBR, which are some of the water and wastewater treatment technologies, which are integrated on the back end, where you get real-time tracking of the data. And, so which is something which is a non-negotiable today. In fact, all the monitoring authorities do require a real-time tracking. So environmental mitigation measures without technological intervention is kind of unthinkable of as of now. And there are very low-cost technologies also, thanks to the inventions that are coming up. I think many of them are coming into the ambit of being low cost and highly efficient. It's just that people really need to get into the details of it to understand what are the innovations that are.
Very interesting. Meera, let's now talk about wastewater. Next few questions are on water.
Yeah.
What are some of the major challenges in wastewater treatment that industries often tend to overlook?
I mean, the challenges are galore. I really don't know where to start it from, but one of them is high cost. Second is a paucity of space available for the water treatment plants, because these are not, how do I say? These are not just a one tank kind of, there are multiple units which are to be aggregated together. So allocating spaces for this kind of plants does become a big, big challenge.
Yeah.
Especially for the small and medium sector businesses who kind of, are juggling with multiple factors. So that becomes one. So their usage of technologies like, for example, MBR, which kind of tries and reduces the footprint area. But then the offset is the slight amount of cost, which also becomes, a burden for clients. So that's one area. Second is the O&M, the operation and maintenance cost. If you see a lot of people, they set up the water and wastewater treatment plants, but maintaining those plants becomes an issue. Third is availability of skilled manpower. This is an area which is highly technical, and we have started talking about environment in the last maybe 10-15 years. So the level of sensitization, the level of awareness is also very limited, and we really don't have a ready-made workforce available in the market. I mean, that's a problem which we constantly face, So that's another one very, very key challenge that people have. So I think in my mind, these are a couple of challenges which
But a few minutes back, Minal, you were saying certain aspects of the environmental compliance are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Similarly, for water treatment, even though they're expensive, and if laws exist, how can an entrepreneur or an industrialist balance cost effectiveness with eco-friendly technologies when it comes to water treatment? Because it is something that everyone recognizes is critical for all of us.
It's a very interesting question, and honestly, we've been doing a bit of work when it comes to industries also. We also have water treatment plants, and especially STPs, sewage treatment plants. But to be very honest, I mean, this is a problem which has been going on for years together.
I know.
And for the reasons which I've mentioned to you, it's kind of a chicken and egg story, and people really have to balance it out. There are multiple technologies which are available. There are some nature-based technologies, which is called maybe a phytoreed, which is really not as expensive. But again, the acceptability and adaptability and the utility of those technologies to the kind of effluent that is getting discharged sometimes may become a bottleneck. I mean, this is such a technical and such a diverse area that what kind of technology is suitable for what effluent kind of dictates the design of a sewage treatment plant. For example, in household, effluents, you need to use a gray water system. So there the components are totally different. Whereas in case of an industrial effluent, where we install normally the effluent treatment plants. The technologies are very, very different. Maybe for a little less complex kind of an effluent, you can use nature-based technologies, which is the phytoreed and some other similar technologies. But yes, today, thanks to the innovation and thanks to the focus on sustainability, there are a lot of people who are coming up with newer inventions. But I think the intent has to be there, even for the entrepreneurs to be able to wanting to do it and wanting to implement. From a compliance standpoint, as I told you, the CPCB and SPCB norms have made it very clear that the industries have to adopt ZLD, zero discharge, which means not even a drop of your water needs to be given back to the system. So there, again, the kind of technologies that you would use are very, very complex. Few of them are SBR is there, MBBR is there. MBBR is one of the most common technology which is adopted because that's been in India for a while and it's much easier to implement.
Yeah, fascinating. Let's now move on. A few more questions for you.
Sure.
Tell me, what is the meaning of sustainable infrastructure? I'd love to get your perspective on what does it truly mean in the Indian context, because we keep saying our scriptures talk about Mother Nature, we keep talking about this, and yet when it comes to looking at our, utilization of natural resources, we seem to keep messing it up all the time. And you're the expert in this area.
Well, see, sustainable infrastructure is much more than just an engineering concept. I think that's the vision that India is following. And I think with all of us participating in it, we can definitely make it a reality. Sustainable infrastructure essentially means you cater to resource efficiency, aspects of climate resilience, and socio-economic inclusions, if I were to put it on the three pillars of what it rests. Talking about sustainability again, now that's such a vast topic. There are multiple layers to it, So one of the areas which I often talk about is while you're developing an infrastructure, you look at development of carbon sinks in the urban infrastructure, and I had written a couple of articles on that as well. What is the concept of a carbon sink? Carbon sink is an area which absorbs more carbon than it emits. If you look at, since you mentioned about Mother Nature, we have a lot of natural carbon sinks which exist in the form of peatlands, in the form of wetlands, in the form of marshy lands. So that's essentially, you can't even fathom the amount of carbon which is trapped inside these wetlands and peatlands. Okay, through these natural substratas and structures which are formed. But when we build infrastructure over it, we kind of tend to destroy that. And this entire carbon then gets emitted in the air, and then the rest is history. So can we look at creating these artificial carbon sinks by integrating these concepts into the design of the infrastructure? That's essentially what a sustainable infrastructure, not only into the design, it has to start from design to the actual implementation. So when you're designing your building, your architecture has to have components of how do you use how can you get maximum natural sunlight? The architecture of the building would define that. What is the sustainable or eco-friendly material that you would use in terms of, implementing that infrastructure or creating that infrastructure? So to give you an example, we have things like carbon negative concrete, which is absorbing more carbon through use of carbon negative cements, which are manufactured by a lot of firms today, and a green cement. So that's one of the areas. Then there is cross-laminated timber, which absorbs a few tons of carbon dioxide per kg of timber. So those kind of construction materials. You have even carbon neutral roads, wherein they use, along with asphalt, they use components like biochar and carbon neutral concrete to be able to absorb the carbon emissions. So, I mean, a lot of these aspects are there. Plus, nature-based solutions. When I say nature-based solutions, how do you integrate the various elements of nature as part of your integrated infrastructure design. So you have things like green roof, green walls, terrace gardens, the blue-green infrastructure, what people love to call it. Uh, so these are various elements of sustainable infrastructure. That's one part of it. But the other aspect of it is the sustainable consumption of the services, which honestly we don't really work in that. But I think I would, take this platform to reach out this message to a lot of people out there. Just even look at your consumption, how sustainable is the consumerism that you're demonstrating and the consumption that you are having on a day-to-day basis.
Fascinating. We don't have time for two more questions for you.
Yep.
My next question is, what are your views on the circular economy principles and their relevance to infrastructure planning?
Circular economy is a very interesting concept. I mean, I think it is, if you look at the traditional economy that we've lived for so many years, it's typically the take it, make it, and dispose it, which is a very traditional linear way of thinking, when it comes to the way you run your economy. Circular economy is just kind of twisted it, take it, make it, don't dispose it, but reuse it and regenerate it and recycle it.
Correct.
And now it's such a vast area, and there's so many facets and so many dimensions to it. But again, talking about the same things, I mean, how do you, for example, you're using any of the natural capital of the nature, water, for example, water treatment and utilizing water, reusing water, recycling it, water, and giving it back to the system is a form of circular economy. So that's one. The life cycle assessments, which, how do I say, the extended producer's responsibility, which form part of the, some of the ESG due diligences, which companies are mandated to be doing it. So the entire product life cycle or the entire services life cycle, right from tracing from where you have sourced the product, how the product is made, how does it get into your system, how does it get into your factory, how have you treated it, and where does it go, and does it go back to the source? Is there a way that you can take it back to the source? So that's essentially completing the loop. Earlier it was linear, now it's circular, just to put it very, very simply.
No, and that's a great explanation, because people are much more aware now of the circular economy. But my last question for you, Minal, I mean, you've given us such amazing insights. Can you share an example of a project where sustainable design led to better outcomes both environmentally and economically?
Yeah, so I'm very passionate when it comes to biodiversity, and I would, love to quote an example from one of the projects that we've done. It was about MIYAWAKI Plantation, where we have transformed literally degraded lands and large landscapes into thriving urban oxygen pockets.
Wow.
Which is, and just to give you the number, more than 2 lakh trees that we've planted, more than 127 lakh shrubs is what we've planted through this, and literally converted these into thriving forest. And today, over the last, I think 3 years is the kind of work that we've done. We planted saplings, say, when we planted, they were 3 to 4 feet samplings. And then the last 3 years now, in fact, I visited one of the parks just last week, and the trees have grown to about 30, 40 feet.
Wow.
And it's just so amazing to see the kind of proliferation of even the biodiversity, flora and fauna that has been thriving in that environment. And Ashutosh, we've just not planted the trees, but we've also kind of tried to capture the real-time impact. So we've done the impact assessment of certain of those geographies. Actually try to figure out that what is the demonstrable impact that we've had on the various parameters of environment. And we've seen that there is a significant microclimate that has been created through these, where the temperature difference of 4 degrees is what we have seen.
Yeah.
The quality of groundwater recharge has improved. The
Hmm.
quality, the composition of soil has improved.
Hmm.
The air pollution parameters have gone down,
Hmm.
and the micro habitat that we have created through these plantations, I mean, it's just amazing. So we have in fact documented. I'll be more than happy to share our biodiversity
Yeah.
impact
Please
assessments as
do. Please do. Please.
that's something which, and plus, yeah, last but not the least, the amount of carbon sequestration. So,
Hmm.
just to give you statistics, a normal tree, a well grown tree, can absorb up to about 22 kilos of carbon. Now,
Hmm.
with the kind of plantation that we've done and the kind of ecosystem and the habitat that we have created, I think the amount of carbon that we've sequestrated is about more than 2,000 tons of CO2 that has been
Wow.
sequestrated.
Wow. Amazing. But on that note, Meenal, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been. I think most of us recognize how much damage has been done to our environment by people from my generation, and how the younger generation, people like you, firms like yours, are beginning to make a serious change in the world that we are going to be leaving behind for generations ahead. Thank you for sharing with me so much details about compliance, about water treatment, about sustainable infrastructure, about circular economy, and about so many other different aspects of biodiversity and all the great work you people are doing. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It was an honor and a pleasure to be part of this. Since you mentioned about legacies, I think I one of my favorite quotes, or I think I read this somewhere, which I truly, honestly believe I would want to end the podcast with. The earth is not a legacy that we have inherited from our ancestors,
Yeah,
but it's a gift that we've borrowed from our children.
correct.
I truly believe that. And it is more
Absolutely.
than incumbent on us to be able to return that gift in a much
Absolutely.
better shape than what we've
Correct.
borrowed.
Correct. Very
Right?
well said. Very well said.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
again.
much. Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.